Hello everyone, Radio Girl over here, trying to give you a narration, explanation, whatever you want to call this, on how I restored this radio. I didn't take too many videos of the process, mainly just photos, so I'll just be kind of like explaining what's going on in each of the pictures. So please bear with me, I don't have a lot of experience making videos or doing voiceovers, so let's begin. So here you can see the radio before anything was done to it. I had basically just gotten it in the mail at this point, and not knowing what I know now, I decided it'd be a good idea to plug it in, and well, thankfully it didn't explode, but as you can see, the tubes did light up. However, I really didn't get any audio or feedback from it, so this was my first indication that this thing needed quite a bit of work. So the first thing I started on was the face of the cathedral. As you can see, this thing looked pretty nasty, decades of gunk, and the ribs were quite damaged. So this is what it looked like after I stripped all of that off, and I started working on the ribs, but wasn't quite happy with it. So I went ahead and applied the finish, and you can see here I have those little pieces taken out. It was quite difficult to get the repair, but as you can see here, I think it turned out quite nicely, and I prefer the darker finish on the wood as well. It's not perfect, but it's about as best as I could do, and I did have to substitute some of the wood with newer pieces. So this is what it looks like done, and I'm pretty happy with it, especially considering what I had to work with. It didn't turn out too bad. Moving on to the cabinet, there wasn't a whole lot to do here. I did, like I said, go with a darker stain. The only major issues I really had were the corners. They were pretty banged up. This one not so bad, but the other corner was, and it's not perfect. You can definitely still see that there is damage, but I think I did a pretty good job, like, repairing it as best as I could. And then here, the layers of the wood were starting to rot out, so I had to cut pieces of wood and splice into the base. Other than that, this is what the cathedral looked like after I was done, and overall really happy with the result. Again, I did go with a darker stain, so but that's about all that needed to be done on the actual cabinet, so not too bad. Now we're going to get onto the electronics, and that's the really fun part. Now, this is where the real challenge began. As you can see, these are the guts of the old radio. It's quite dusty, dirty, and there's a couple of issues right off the bat. So the big white thing, that's not supposed to be there. That's like a AC unit capacitor. And then you can see some red and yellow capacitors there. Those are not supposed to be there. It looks like someone had tried to repair this at some point in the past, but they didn't quite do a great job since the radio was not working when I got it. And again, just look at all that dust. It was pretty dirty, especially on the top side as well. Those are some pretty dusty vacuum tubes. So also, as you can see, the original dial scale unfortunately did not survive its time and shipping, so we are going to have to replace that too. So when doing a restoration like this, it does involve a lot of work. So if you look at these little things here, the little red and yellow things, these are called dog bone resistors. This is what we had before the resistor that you are familiar with today with the colored stripes. These two were bad. They didn't test well, and I had to just make some new ones. So what I did was I took like a Bic pen, you know, like a ink pen, cut the plastic casing, painted it the right color it needed to be, and then put a modern resistor inside of it. And then I capped it with some clay, painted it, and then wired it in, and you almost can't even tell. I also did the same thing with two other resistors that were green and brown, so that was a pretty fun little thing. But luckily, most of the resistors on this radio were actually intact. What was not intact, however, were pretty much all the capacitors. So the capacitors on these, they're made out of like a Bakelite material, and they're packed with tar. So what I did was I took all of the capacitors out, removed the tar, took the original guts out, and I went ahead and put a modern capacitor inside and then repacked it. So yes, it does have some modern parts in it, but I was able to repack them and make them look original. So, and that's the best I could do. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have done all original on this, but unfortunately, I was not able to do that. Moving on to other parts of the radio, an interesting piece that I was a little worried about not testing well would be the wire wound resistor. That would be this black thing here at the bottom. It's very delicate because it has like human hair thin wire coiled around it thousands of times. They're very hard to find and replace. Thankfully, mine tested well along with the choke and all the transformer coils. I got very lucky with this radio. Honestly, the only things that I really needed to replace were the capacitors, 4 resistors, and that was about it. Obviously, I did start redoing all of the wire, and the wire is interesting because it has to be arranged in a very specific way. This type of radio is really sensitive to interference, so yes, the wires had to be arranged in a certain way to prevent as much internal interference as possible. There's a much more sophisticated answer to that, but I'm just trying to simplify this as best I can. So I had to route all the wires in a very specific way per the schematics. So onto the wires though, these are all cloth covered wire and each color is a different type of wire. So I tried to replicate the color code as best as I could, again, per the schematics. However, if you look here really carefully, you'll see some wire covered with black shrink wrap and little tiny green or yellow shrink wrap. I could not find that type of wire anywhere. So I basically just had to do as best I could using shrink wrap instead of cloth. But hopefully you can appreciate that. But this is what the underside of the chassis looks like after I was finished. Now we can go over my favorite part, which is the top side. So as you can see, before anything was done to it, it was quite dusty and dirty. But now you can see the process starting to make things look a little bit better. I replaced the wire caps and polished everything that I could, and now we've got the radio powered up. And for those of you familiar with aircraft maintenance, yes, those are Clecos holding the dial scale on. On top of that, I used aircraft rivets to rivet it back to the radio, so I couldn't find any brads, so hope you guys enjoy that little tidbit. But I think the tubes turned out great. All of them worked. I did not have to replace a single tube on this. I was really happy with that. So, and then you can see here, you know, you've got the light working, shining through on the dial scale. Overall, beautiful top side. Really happy with how it turned out. Now onto the speaker wire. Not a whole lot had to be done here. I did have to redo all the wiring in the prongs as those had corroded pretty bad. And obviously I put brand new cloth wire on. I just had to be careful with the Bakelite plug because it was pretty brittle. And then here I've got the wiring going to the speaker. Now the speaker, it was not testing at all whenever I was trying to read resistance. So I didn't know at this point if it even worked. So we'll get to that later. But here is the completed wiring setup. As you can see, the wire is coiled. Back to, you know, when I was having to, you know, arrange the wires in the chassis, same thing here. Schematics wanted them to be coiled to kind of help deal with any kind of like interference. But this is the completed speaker wire and the rebuilt power supply wire. Now it is time to show you the first signs of life for this radio. So I've got a couple of clips coming up here, and this will be the first time I ever got any kind of audio to come out of the speakers. Again, at this point, I did not know if the speaker would work at all, especially considering the fact that the cone was damaged heavily and just missing entire pieces of cone. But please enjoy, and do keep in mind this is a 100-year-old radio with a cracked speaker cone and no antenna. But please enjoy.
When I call your name, step back. Thompson, Young. Look at the dog, dude. I need to find his finger. So, they'll get found. They love you. They get what? So repentance. Wise repentance is repentance that comes quickly after the sin has been committed. Learn more about living the Christian life. A replay of today's message is available at our website. You can also find other messages in our audio archives. Or download podcasts to take with you. Touch.org. And if you were encouraged and equipped today.
So as you could hear, the audio quality was pretty bad. Again, cracked speaker cone. So this is what I did to fix it. Eventually, I will actually send this in to get reconed. I finally found a couple of people that would do a reconing for this. So I'm really excited to know what this speaker is going to sound like after it's professionally repaired. But please enjoy my shoddy envelope paper and tape repair. The next video clip you'll see is after repairing the cone, and just enjoy.
From coast to coast, and I love the globe on American Forces Network.
So not too bad, much better than the first recording. Now, this here is the DIY AM transmitter kit that I got off eBay. It was in pieces, so I did have to solder everything together, but it broadcast off of 1570 kilohertz. And the next video I show you will be my own broadcast on the radio, and this is how I did all the Has-Been Hotel recordings as well. So enjoy this one. Anyways, guys, that's all I've got for this video. I apologize if it wasn't more in-depth. I mean, I could only go off of the photos that I had taken during the restoration. I'll probably do a much more thorough video on my next radio project, so stay tuned for that. But again, I really do appreciate you guys watching this to the end. If you do have any other questions, I could try to answer them in a bit more detail. I do apologize, for my awful voiceover for this video. Again, I don't have any experience doing this. This is the first time I've ever made a video like this. So I just appreciate you guys bearing with me. And if you guys did hear my cat meowing in the background, I do apologize. She likes to be involved on the videos as well. So anyways, thank you guys, and stay tuned for more content.